Cybersecurity headlines.
Okta has a tough week with HTTP and Cloudflare. Cisco gets a visit from the ghost of vulnerabilities past. Turns out it wasn't just a bit of potato. And CISA protests potential 25% budget cut. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we'll get a chance for some insight, opinion, and expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Arvin Bansal, the former CISO at Nissan Americas. Arvin, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, glad to be here, Rich.
We are going to be digging into the news in just 1 second. Before we do so, I have to thank our sponsor for today, Vanta. Automate up to 90% of security compliance. Remember to join us on YouTube Live. To do so, go to CISOseries.com, hit the events dropdown, and look for the Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review image. Click on it to join us. Subscribe to the channel, and then you'll see us every time we go live. And be sure to contribute your comments in that chat. If you are watching live, we want to hear from you. If you have any questions about the stories, we'll get to them during the show and do our best to address all of our comments. We've got about 20 minutes, though, so let's jump into the news. First up here, over 80% of security leaders have already received AI email attacks. A recent report from Abnormal Security has revealed that nearly all 98% of security leaders are concerned about the cybersecurity risks posed by artificial intelligence tools, with 80% of respondents confirming their organizations have either already received AI-generated email attacks or strongly suspect that is the case. The majority of respondents rely on their cloud email providers or legacy tools for email security. Nearly half of respondents, 46%, lack confidence in traditional solutions to detect and block AI-generated attacks. So, Arvin, relying on cloud email providers or legacy tools for email security while lacking confidence in traditional solutions does not exactly fill me with great confidence about a company's ability to respond to AI-generated malicious emails. I'm curious, what advice could you offer your fellow security leaders in this regard?
Uh, Rich, I would give a three-prong advice. The first one, we got to beat AI with AI. Yeah. So, second is innovate and invest, and lastly, using a layered security approach. Right. So AI for AI, that's where we need to incorporate more and more AI solutions that are going through the threat detection algorithms to counter these AI generated attacks. So, for example, there are tons of AI threat detection tools in the market now. Right?
Mhm.
Innovate and invest. This is something really new. So there are lots of startups that are working on it. There are companies like Wald, which are protecting the data that's going into an AI model. There are companies like Cranium that are looking at the perimeter of the data and securing the LLM model. There is Calypso, there is Sirius in the privacy area. Those are all eh, those are all smaller companies, which generally falls through the radar. So the CISOs really need to get into that startup world and build those partnerships to quickly secure AIs. And for some reason, I'm seeing a lot of AI generated companies. They all start with C. Calypso, Sirius, Cranium.
That's that has to be some sort of search optimization going on there. It's funny. I was reading an IBM report today that described, kind of AI and then the opportunity and the need to invest in these kind of tools, kind of a burning platform moment for enterprises out there, right? It's either jump into the unknown or get burnt. Definitely kind of see that in your response to this
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
All right, our next story here, Okta's bad week. Security company Okta made the news twice this week. First, with regard to a recent attack that involved threat actors gaining access to customers' HTTP archive files, short formed as HAR, which are used for troubleshooting or by replicating browser activity, and they contain sensitive data, things like cookies and session tokens that threat actors can use to impersonate valid users. Kind of a treasure trove. The company is also embroiled in a breach that impacted Cloudflare and password management company 1Password. So, Arvin, two directions. I guess we go with this first would be to understand more about the HAR attack and kind of what is it, how common is it, And the second would be to discuss, kind of the breach impacting one password, that might have potential reverberations, especially when it comes to the public's perception about password managers in general. I'm curious, what stands out to you here?
Yeah. So the horror attack, it's not very common to begin with. But let's understand what is HAR attacks, right? So HAR, these are the files. When we communicate between a website and the browser is storing a file, HAR files,
Mhm.
contains the session information, the cookies, and in most cases, even the passwords. And that's why attackers are going after that. So it is, though it hasn't been that common, it's becoming common, but it's very significant now. And the exposure is very large because everything is being done through the webs using the browser and the sites. So one question is, what can we do? We got to implement stricter access control. We got to encrypt when we store and transfer the hard files across the technologies. Now, the final part is that people don't really look into is many of these files end up into our debug environment. So, are we looking into our debug environment when we bring in those files? Are we redacting the data in those files or not? Right. So, those are some of the things I would look at. Now, in terms of the password files, one password, there are three big things happening with that breach. The very first one is the erosion of trust. Now, customers will start questioning the platform. We will start looking at the vulnerable third-party breaches platforms that involves Okta. Okta is a large company. The second one is the reputation risk. Once you are a victim of such breach, it has a long-lasting reputational damage that can cause. And lastly, we'll see increased skepticism. Now, users will think twice before mid to small to large enterprises integrating password managers with other third-party services like SSOs, right? Because they fear it as another layer of vulnerability. So those are some of my thoughts.
All right. Well, I love those, and it going back to the first part of that with the heart attacks. It does make me think. I spent years doing media for enterprise IT and storage, and I would hear secondary storage vendors talking all about the security importance and the encryption and stuff like that they were doing. And a lot of people would roll their eyes, and I feel like we are realizing the value of those kinds of solutions for sure. It makes my enterprise IT heart patter a little faster. All right, next up here, Cisco identifies additional iOS XE vulnerability. Cisco also had a bad week with a number of Cisco devices with a supposed malicious implant that threat actors seem to exploit while also hiding their activities. Not exactly great. Compounding the problem was a vulnerability that had been patched in 2021, but was still being exploited by that implant. So, Arvin, Cisco is big. Technical problems like that are bound to happen, but does the idea that a legacy vulnerability like this can leap back to life, is that a cause for concern? And what can CISOs even do to contemplate such like a problem like that?
It is a huge concern now, Rich, right? So we thought we found something, we thought we fixed those things, and few years later, bam, it's coming right back. So it actually changes the foundation of how we approach the security program, right?
Mhm.
So within that security program, the vulnerability management program, one of the oldest program in security, we need to rethink. It's not just about, hey, get the solution to discover the vulnerabilities, remediate them, but you have to go back to older vulnerabilities like heartbleeds to stay defended, right? So not just the new, look at the old vulnerabilities. That's the first thing CISOs can do. The second one, the patch auditing. We think we patched the system, it's not showing up. How do we make sure that it really did? So just bring in the techniques of auditing that we do in a normal course of business to the vulnerability management, patch management as well. Crucial. And the last one I would say is, there are a lot of internal threats coming in as well, right? So we had 2020 Twitter hack, right? So the access was being gone. So we need to build an architecture. And I know we say zero trust is sort of a, too much used term,
Loaded term these days.
loaded
Yeah.
term, but let's just bring it down to only the access part. Are we looking and verifying the each and every access request we are getting? Probably no, right? So just vulnerability management, think it differently. Heartbleed is an example. Patch auditing, think it differently. The 2017 Equifax breach, just imagine if there was patch auditing, we wouldn't be spending $1 billion on the program, right? Zero trust architecture, Twitter types of attacks.
Well, and I've noticed recently an increased conversation about when we're talking about critical vulnerabilities or CVEs that are dubbed critical and stuff like that. But those lacking the context, and if you're trying to patch all of those, then you're missing the things that are going to be the most impactful to you. And I think also to that point, if you're doing that, you just have less bandwidth or less funding, less budget, whatever, to do that kind of auditing to catch even the stuff that you missed, before, you potentially missed before. And I think that's a part of the conversation I haven't heard as much about. So thanks for bringing that up. That was good stuff. Next up here, CISA protests potential 25% budget cut as catastrophic. Eric Goldstein, the executive assistant director for cybersecurity at CISA, speaking at a hearing on federal cybersecurity, said the 25% cut to CISA's budget proposed by House Republicans will leave CISA in a period of stasis even as our adversaries evolve, pointing out that Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are key threats. So, government administrators, especially those on the conservative side, are always looking to curb government spending, or at least justify it. The expectation is that the private sector should then shoulder the burden of protecting itself. But Arvin, I'm curious, what do you foresee if CISA was to cut back that far? Or do you think that number, that 25% number, is a bargaining chip for other political items?
I definitely think a lot about being a bargaining chip in the political arena. I think it's a good example is how the FEMA funding was delayed earlier because of these bargainings. Now that does come with a risk, right? So if the public start looking at you and something bad happens and they're like, hey, this party brought that bill, does that bring or build the public trust for the company, for the party, and for the organizations, or does it erode it, right? So that's one part. The second part is looking at cyber defense for the country. Already cyber budgets are generally constrained. The government funding is constrained. We know there's a lot we can do into our country's cybersecurity, right? And then on top of that, we are cutting. Does that mean we already have the defenses we need? Probably not, right? So that's one part. And lastly, yes, private sector can burden the shoulder. But look at the history. Whenever private sector builds something on the cybersecurity side, do they come together or do they build in silos? Right. So it's like saying, hey, we're going to have a number of smaller fire brigades instead of a central fire station or fire department, right? Do we need a central fire department for cyber, or do we need numbers of cyber department, right?
Well, we got some feedback from our audience. James Driscoll is saying that a budget cut to CISA is going to put us more at risk than we already are. And I guess the only thing I would say with this is I guess it would be one thing if maybe it was more behind the scenes, that we weren't necessarily seeing the impact of this, but covering the news for cybersecurity headlines, like, we definitely see the impacts in terms of tooling that's coming out, in terms of takedowns, in terms of policies, in terms of the must patch list and stuff like that. That you could say, okay, that's compliance, that's a checkbox, but that's helping some people out, right? Like there are, like, you definitely are seeing results now. I'm sure, if you want to cut CISA's budget, you could say you could still do that with a lesser budget. I know it's a complicated issue, but yeah, it definitely will have to keep an eye on that and see how far that goes down the political road. Before we move on to our next story for today, we're going to spend a moment and hear and thank our sponsor for today, Vanta. Growing a business, that likely means more tools, third-party vendors, and data sharing, aka way more risk. Vanta's market-leading trust management platform brings GRC and security efforts together. Integrate information from multiple systems and reduce risk to your business and your brand, all without the need for additional staffing. And by automating up to 90% of the work for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, you'll be able to focus on strategy and security, not maintaining compliance. Join 5,000 fast-growing companies that leverage Vanta to manage risk and improve security in real time. Our listeners get $1,000 off Vanta. Go to vanta.com/CISO to claim this discount. That's VANTA.com/CISO. Threat actor sells access to Facebook and Instagram police portal. According to Alon Gal, the co-founder and CTO of cybersecurity firm Hudson Rock, the portal is used by law enforcement to request data related to users, things like IP, phone numbers, DMs, device information, or request the removal of posts and the ban of accounts. Gal believes this was a social engineering attack in which the threat actors either solicited access or solicited data from a Meta employee or use police credentials to gain access. We've definitely covered stories of similar attacks using spoofed emails. This gives the individual the ability to make unauthorized data requests, enable harassment and doxing, initiate fake law enforcement actions, and steal identities. Some very nasty real-world harms potentially. So, Arvin, what seems like maybe a small incident becomes the raw material for doxing, swatting, or worse, given the focus that sophisticated cybercrime operations like Scattered Spider and the Lazarus Group place on social engineering. Do you feel that senior management at any organization should place greater priority on social engineering awareness?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So with AI generation, we are getting a lot of support, creativity, and laser-like precision for doing spear phishing and social engineering attacks. Right. MGM is a great example. And they try to go after the newer employees. That's what happened there. So we definitely need to put more emphasis onto the social engineering aspect for the entire organization. So what are the two things we can do? One is on the user training itself. We need to have more customized training based on the new attacks that we are seeing and the type of leadership we have, right? The second one is the top down approach, right? So how do you mobilize the entire organization? It comes from the leadership. So the leadership, they can set the tone for the importance of social engineering. Something they can do as simple as sharing their own experience in a monthly cybersecurity newsletter, right? So that can mobilize people towards this direction. And just to share with you, Rich, yesterday there was a board call government security organizations, and we heard an example from the speaker that in his organization, people on the lower level
Mhm.
are getting requests from generals on their LinkedIn profile.
Oh, jeez.
So
Wow.
they're so they're running to their boss and they're like, "Hey, there's no way in hell general should be asking questions from there. Let
From
me double
LinkedIn.
check." And then of course it comes out to be coming from Russia, right?
Mhm.
So those are the new creative things that are coming on, and that's why we need to double down on social engineering attacks.
All right, well, our final two stories for today: Microsoft's Scattered Spider warning and Copilot. Microsoft has described the group Scattered Spider as one of the most dangerous financial criminal groups, pointing to its operational fluidity and its ability to incorporate SMS phishing, SIM swapping, and help desk fraud into its attack model. The group has been seen using impersonation techniques, with members posing as newly hired employees in its target firms in order to blend in. So, definitely some ties to stories that we've been talking about. I mean, literally just talking about in terms of, hey, it turns out when the boss is asking for something, you're more likely to do it. With all of this going on here, I'm curious, Arvin, do you see it makes me think, like, could AI come to the rescue in terms of identifying threat patterns for these kind of attacks, or is that already kind of a factor, whether we want to call it AI or an algorithm or something like that? Or do you think that's too much subjective authority, I guess, to give to something, so a tool like that?
I think there are two major benefits that AI can deliver, and
Mhm.
then we have to balance, there's a risk that it comes with, right? So on the two benefit side, you can have AI assisted threat identification, right? You can't, we already know using chat gpt, human intelligence of giving you answer at that speed and modifying things is just next to impossible. So we have to deploy AI, starting with the threat identification. A good example would be like anomaly detection in systems,
Mhm.
right? That can flag unauthorized access or unusual data transfer. AI can do it very quickly. The second one is the human AI collaboration, right? So AI can be a force multiplier for the human analyst going through vast amount of data. Right. So SIM is a great example. We keep feeding tons and tons and tons of data from everywhere, but how do we make it more palatable for a new analyst? Right. So AI can help collect that and do that. Now, the risk that it comes with, Rich, is on the ethical side. Right. So that's one part, and the other part is it could be giving a lot of false positive or misuses. Right. So we all know the case of a lawyer presenting into the court the precedents of the
Yes.
history and then finding that, right? So we just need to be cognizant about those kind of things.
Well, and I think we're definitely going to be seeing putting the testing those tools because Microsoft is now testing its security copilot. We heard about this back in March, but
Mhm.
it's opening up an early access pilot embedded within Microsoft 365 Defender XDR, which means we're going to be seeing a ton of people trying this out. And it's kind of that force
Right.
multiplier that you were talking about. Microsoft saying it can free up to 40% more time that would otherwise go to mundane tasks. And exactly to your point, Arvin, seen as a way to upskill less skilled analysts. At least that's how Microsoft's pitching it. Doing things like summarizing security incidents in natural language, analyze incidents, synthesize reports. Again,
Right.
helping you sort through all of that data. Even using natural language to do KQL queries and stuff like that. So I'm curious, how hopeful, I guess, are you for tooling like that? Microsoft, not exactly a small fish in the security industry.
Right. Yeah. And not to forget their investment into OpenAI and
Yes.
how they saw these things years before, right? And now how quickly they are moving by building AI capabilities into Azure as
Mhm.
well. And the RAG model that everybody is adopting now to have a conversation with these LLMs for security. So I'm greatly helpful, when it comes to larger organization coming out with co-pilots. We are also looking at some of the security companies releasing their own co-pilots too, right? So when it comes to securing the applications, we have companies introducing those co-pilots. I think the co-pilots are going to go, in the beginning they'll help a lot ramping up AI in the sector.
Mhm.
Then we're going to see some of the shortcomings from those co-pilots. We're going to have some disappointments that, hey, they are not exactly how they are sold to us in terms of human efficiencies or analysts solving the incidents, because you do need some sort of human intelligence behind those tasks, right? But then, as the startup world, like in the past, it picks up, I think we are going to see a huge benefits coming out of AI co-pilots, AI assisted security, incident response, remediation, protections into place.
Yeah, I think it's really important to go in eyes open and realize, like, listen, like just like every like old like film reel of like the House of Tomorrow from the 1960s. It's never quite that, but even if we get 80% of the way there, and we're not over investing in it, and we're still having checks, and we're still having humans in the loop, we're having fail safes to make sure these systems aren't missing stuff or hallucinating wholesale. Yeah, for sure. I am also extremely optimistic. We're already seeing that, with GitHub, with their Copilot, not to just stick on the Microsoft train, but these more specialized LLMs and what they're capable of doing and the utility that they provide
Yeah.
for people that are dealing with a lot of information, for sure.
And Rich, I'll give you a quick 15-second example. I had the honor of being in a room, founder of Google DeepMind, Andrew Ng. We
Yes.
had Microsoft General Counsel, OpenAI General Counsel. There are cases in the industry that are flowing out where people are using GitHub or other repositories to get the codes and then use them to make money. AI assisted money, right?
Mhm.
So now there are legal implications arising out that, hey, you used my code to make this money. Now give me a revenue share. So
Yeah, yeah, and we're seeing that across the LLM spectrum, kind
yeah,
of, yeah. Let's get some credit where credit's due. That's a
yeah,
big thorny issue, Arvin.
yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of what's fascinating from someone that is not in that every single day to see how that will all shake out and where we'll be on the other side of it.
Right.
Before we get out of here, Arvin, was there any story that was a thumbs up or an eye roller for you today? Something that just really stood out for you?
I think the stood out part is the Microsoft Security Copilot. I would
Mhm.
say that's a step in the right direction. Positive momentum, and coming from companies like Microsoft, the adoption will be much quicker because they are already in the ecosystem for the corporations. The eye roller part, really the hard part. I my heart goes to Okta and the team because it's
Mhm.
not that any company would wish happens to them. So I can put myself into their shoes and empathize with them. uh, but at the same time, we're going to come out stronger. We have seen these breaches in the past. We've been down before, but we always get up and we always move forward. So our support is there for them.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Arvin Bansal, the former CISO at Nissan Americas, bringing the great takes. Truly appreciate your experience and your expertise on our stories today. Where can people find you if they are so inclined?
LinkedIn.com, and Arvin Bansal is my handle.
And did you have another link that you wanted to send our listeners to
Yeah,
today?
yeah, absolutely. So I have known this amazing, mental health nonprofit organization since my Citigroup days.
Hmm.
So I'm probably dating myself for about 2 decades now. Uh, Fantastic organization. There are a lot of us. You know, we live we live a privileged life to have what we need and even more. But there are others in the world who doesn't have access to basic things such as mental health, access to care. So this organization, All Access for Mental Health, it provides hope for people who have lost access to care. They provide psychiatric evaluations and consultations. They do medication management. They do same day appointments and even telemedicine. Because it mental health is a serious problem that we need to look at, and people don't come out and share with you. So my shout out to everyone. If you see someone, say something, send them our way. All Access Mental Health is where hope begins.
And we will definitely have a link for that in the show notes. Thank you for sharing that, Arvin. Really means a lot. Thanks also to our sponsor for today, Vanta. Automate up to 90% of security compliance. Thanks to everyone that was watching the live stream today, getting involved in there, and we truly appreciate your time. Remember, you can always find us at 3:30 p.m. Eastern for the Week in Review show. We would love your questions and comments, so be sure to join us for the live show. It is a good time. And remember to join us next Friday for Super Cyber Friday, where our topic will be hacking SOC 2, an hour of critical thinking on trust, security, and compliance. That starts at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And at the end of the hour, we'll switch gears and have a meetup where everyone gets a chance to meet face to face virtually. If you meet face to face in real life, I don't know what you're doing. Please leave our people alone. But virtual meetup, fun times will be had by all. And then we'll have our week in review show pretty soon after, about 90 minutes after everything is done there. In the meantime, though, if you just want the cybersecurity news, we've got your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines. Every single day, give us about 6 minutes. We'll get you all caught up. Until the next time we meet, I'm Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.